watch, nothing like, nothing subscribe, nothing! What's up, y'all? It's me, Emma, the heavy metal lawyer. It's time for another video where I make an argument for a certain year being the greatest year for an extreme music genre. I've done death metal, I've done power violence, and my last video on sludge metal was the most popular one yet. So now it is time to tackle one of the most polarizing extreme music genres, D-Beat. And the year is 2008. Which does require a lot of explanation. D-Beat is a subgenre in a music scene where there is unfettered worship to the band that was its godfather, Discharge. Discharge started in 1977 as part of the UK's anarcho-punk scene, but adopted a particular aesthetic and sound that immediately set it apart. You can think of Discharge as being like the biblical Abraham, laying down the foundation for all of D-Beat that came after it. A love of feedback and other noise, an obsession with nuclear apocalypse, a black and white high contrast photography aesthetic, and of course the trademark charging D-Beat. From this foundation, the first wave of D-Beat was started in the 1980s with bands like Anti-Cimex, Mob 47, and the Varukers. Unsurprisingly for these bands, Discharge were contemporaries rather than idols, so they lacked the kind of worship of Discharge and blatant copying of aesthetic that you would see in later D-Beat bands. That Discharge worship element would come in the 1990s, due primarily to one band, which next to Discharge is the subgenre's most influential band, Disclose. Disclose, more than any other band, solidified D-Beat into its own subgenre and musical scene, both in their home country of Japan and around the world. Because of Disclose's singular importance, I initially thought about doing this video with a year that related to Disclose, especially 2003, which was when Yesterday's Fairy Tale, Tomorrow's Nightmare was released. And certainly that was an important year for D-Beat because it was also the year that Misanthropic Generation by Dysphere was released. Dysphere being the third most important band for D-Beat after Discharge and Disclose. However, at this point, D-Beat was still pretty fragmented. Its first wave having been perfected by Disclose and Dysphere, and in an alternative universe, it could have easily faded from there into obscurity. In 2007, Disclose guitarist and vocalist Hideki Kawakami died of acute alcohol poisoning. While punk from its beginning had a hedonistic, live fast, die young attitude, D-Beat's grim obsession with nuclear apocalypse made it, to put it in modern lingo, especially black-pilled. As such, the tragic death of Kawakami made him into a kind of martyr for D-Beat, with the expression Kawakami forever quickly becoming found everywhere in the scene and even gigs today being played in his name. Like Christ dying to bring a new gospel, Kawakami's death in 2007 led to the start of the second wave of D-Beat in 2008. So let's talk about what made 2008 such a huge year for D-Beat. First and foremost was Live the Storm by Dysphere. While there had been hints of this in their prior album, Misanthropic Generation, Live the Storm is where the band really started to incorporate elements of Swedish death metal into their sound, while still keeping the relentless charging D-Beat rhythm. Meanwhile, Mob 47, one of D-Beat's original founders, put out their greatest album, Dom Luger Igen. While utilizing the heavier and fuzzier sound of the second wave, Mob 47 rejected the epic, longer songs of Dysphere in favor of a breakneck speed that made it borderline power violence. Yes, D-Beat's second wave was firmly rooted in Sweden. Pun-loving vegans Satan would release their album D-Beat Hippie Lovers. D-Beat veterans, meanwhile, put out their album Reality or Nothing. And the great Wolf Brigade put out one of their best albums in 2008 as well, Come Alive, which serves as a good midpoint of the spectrum between the more melodic and structured Dysphere versus the more abrasive and chaotic Mob 47. But Sweden was not the only place that second wave D-Beat was taking off. In Canada, a band named Skunk put out their self-titled album that brought grindcore influences, especially with vocals, to D-Beat, creating a raw, even more extreme version of D-Beat carried on today by bands like Noisy Neighbors. In Brazil, Beethoven was carrying the D-Beat flag with their album Seeking Shelter in the Darkness of War. In Australia, the Great Piss Christ released their albums Victims of Faith. Italian D-Beat was headed up by Contato, who in 2008 released Disillusion. And Spain had the hilariously named Dishammer with their album Vintage Addiction. I was 18 during this resurgence of D-Beat that hit my little corner of hardcore and metal in Virginia like a tsunami. While Virginia's musicians of the time were more interested in parts of crust punk, more aligned with doom and thrash metal, venues like Nara Sushi and Alley Cats were hosts to innumerable US bands that put out great releases in 2008, like Death Raid with their self-titled album, Perdition with their self-titled album, and Warcry with their album Not So Distant Future. In 2008, Richmond, Virginia would host the first Collapse Fest, a music festival for crust punks and D-Beat bands. Unfortunately, I can't find a full lineup of who played, but it included Direct Control, Thrall, SSR, Social Dropouts, and Aghast. So, do you think 2008 was the greatest year for D-Beat? Do you have enough brain cells from all the malt liquor and huffing glue for me to be able to trust your memory? Let me know what you think in the comments, and please like and subscribe.